Largely today, our discourse around AI is largely around some kind of generative AI like LLM. What are the critical skills that people need when you have these tools that can automate away like some of the most mundane jobs? Internet first came in, I think most newspapers were available for free online.
Yes.
Today, pretty much like every newspaper article is behind some paywall.
Everyone, welcome back to another episode of KreAItive Dialogues, where ideas, disciplines, and perspectives meet to reshape how AI is changing disciplines at Krea University, how it's affecting what we teach, learn, and understand. So joining me today is Dr. Prathamesh, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Krea University. Hello, Professor.
Hi.
Dr. Prathamesh, you are a computer science professor. You have worked in computational algorithms and other data analytics, I'm assuming?
Mostly computational logic. So that's basically the primary area on which I've worked.
Can you please tell me how has AI really affected your classroom and how has it really affected how you teach now?
Okay, so there are several ways in which we really think about AI.
Right.
Okay, so first and foremost, when we really talk about AI affecting the classroom, we need to get a perspective of what AI is, right? I mean, what the current AI is that we are at this juncture.
Right.
So the term artificial intelligence, it kind of goes back to basically it was a word that was coined in the 1956 for something called as a Dartmouth workshop. And it was kind of coined with a very specific intent of basically kind of drawing certain funding towards this new emerging domain of cybernetics, where people were trying to build systems that could reason. Okay. And so the techniques that people used around the 1950s were very different from the kind of techniques we have today.
Right.
And at that point, people were primarily interested in building reasoning engines. And now we are primarily interested in engines that recognize patterns, and as an outcome, maybe they may kind of give certain kind of reasoning, or they may have certain kind of abilities that seem like reasoning to us. Okay, so that is what the current state of what we mean by AI, right? So these are largely pattern recognition tools which kind of draw upon a large amount of data, and based on this data, they kind of tend to kind of mimic and identify certain patterns. And to the extent that human reasoning depends on pattern recognition, even when we reason, okay, it tends to mimic certain things fairly well. Okay, but is it artificial intelligence in the sense that the word was originally intended to be? I mean, that could be debatable. Okay, like in the sense the kind of reasoning they have is not as sure shot. I mean, you may have heard of the word hallucinations, right? So there is certain kind of like gray areas with respect to how much we can really call it AI in the original sense that it was intended to be. But whatever, let's kind of assume that whatever the technology exists is AI in the sense that we use it today. The way it's kind of affected the classroom today is that there are a fair number of learning tools, okay, right? So now people can kind of don't necessarily need to rely on an instructor. Let's say they can take a piece of code, and earlier it required a certain human intervention, and as long as the particular kind of the AI engine, you can call it, right? Then LLM, especially largely today, our discourse around AI is largely around some kind of generative AI like LLM, right? And so these techniques, to the extent that they can kind of explain or identify pattern, or they're trained on the kind of data that they see in the classroom, they tend to have reasonable kind of abilities to explain certain things. So the reliance on the instructor is kind of taken a different shape altogether, right? Okay, and then also it kind of thinks that now, of course, then how do we evaluate, right? I mean, that's one kind of a question that kind of changes, pops up, right? I mean, and there, of course, with these tools, you know, I mean, which even earlier there were other forms, right? People could go on something like a Stack Exchange or ask the doubts on an online forum, but now you have these tools that kind of make that job much more easier. Okay. Now the second question is, what are the critical skills that people need when you have these tools that can automate away like some of the most mundane jobs, right? So what does a programmer bring to the table, right? And that is something that has fundamentally kind of changed in the last few years, right? And so for instance, earlier the idea was that a programmer comes and essentially writes down the entire code, okay. Now you have these tools that you can actually lead a prompt to, and they can generate a prompt fairly kind of reasonably well on those kind of problems on which there is some kind of training, okay. Now the question is, there is also a bit of speciousness there, right? So they seem correct, but they may not be correct. Okay, just to cite an example, the other day, I mean, I was using some of these tools to kind of help me kind of generate some kind of data analytic code, and especially in a language that they've been well trained in. And the percentage base on which they calculated was a different percentage base than what I actually asked them to do it.
I see.
Okay, right? So I think there are these kind of issues that often crop up, and
Okay.
it's been kind of highlighted. They also have an inability to logically reason.
Right.
Okay, so which is why the kind of emphasis today has shifted more and more to be able to, can you actually critically separate something
Right.
that looks correct versus something that is correct?
Correct. Right.
Right?
Yes.
And that kind of criticality and nuance is something that we have kind of changed our emphasis as far as our
As far as the
pedagogical
programming.
curriculum. It's not
Right.
just that you're able to generate it, maybe you were able to generate it, maybe you're able to generate it by training it a couple of times and to that extent, and you're able to kind of prompt it. And the second thing is, are you able to articulate what you want very precisely? Are you able to discuss technical language in a very precise terms that you can actually kind of put into an AI,
Right.
right? And that's where the liberal arts framework again comes into a good play, where you get a solid understanding in terms of training and articulation, right?
Thank you for that amazing answer that I think was really, really well articulated to bring back to what we were talking about. How ethical is it really to have an AI model that is generating data based off of other people's data, often without credit, and at such large environmental costs? Where does the ethical model fall in these respects?
I think there are people who are trying to kind of work on various frameworks in which how like the data that has been trained on can be rewarded, the consent can be sought on. So as of now, I don't think we have clear answers to that, right?
Right.
And to the extent that these frameworks are kind of being kind of built on, and how much they are actually the companies which are kind of implementing them are also is another question, right? With respect to environmental costs, yes, it is quite substantial, and it remains a challenge to which these techniques can be able to scale up, right?
Right.
So we have now certain kind of corporations of a certain size who actually can invest in this infrastructure,
Right.
and they kind of currently make it open source, right? I mean,
Right.
are kind of at least making it freely available for people to kind of use them. How long will that remain the case? We need to kind of, it's about wait and watch, right? For instance, I mean, just to cite an example, when I think when internet first came in, I think most newspapers were available for free online.
Yes.
Today, pretty much like every newspaper article is behind some paywall, right? And so I think these are questions and challenges. I mean, so how long will the kind of revenue model? These are questions I think that sometimes need people to step outside the realm of computer science to kind of be able to
Right.
answer that. And
So
yes,
you have to basically weigh in, like, the companies have to weigh whether, like, they are more focused on bringing in more people into using the AI, or whether they are more concerned with paywalling it and like
revenue generation,
and everything.
Yeah.
But don't you think that at the end of the day, the more number of people that use it, the more data is being fed into these LLMs? So at the end of the day, where it is honestly, isn't it more beneficial to have it be open source?
I would think so. I mean, I don't necessarily have that degree of expertise in finance to kind of
Right,
answer
right.
it. So the way the current models the companies are working it, okay, we have this one tool which is reasonably sophisticated but not the most sophisticated version. If you want a more sophisticated version, you come and pay me, right? I mean, that's the model in which the companies are working on, so we have access to some version.
Right.
Now to the what layers of the next versions will be basically and will be made available to the public, and what amount of it will be paywalled at some point
Right.
is something that we have to kind of, it's about wait and watch and
Yes.
see the developments, and I think they depend on too many factors, including
Yeah.
global economy.
Fair
Right?
enough.
So,
So, for our student viewers, what do you think is something that they can, like, take away from AI, apart from just like tech skills or the critical thinking and everything else that you mentioned earlier on?
Okay, one thing I would think is it's a simple curiosity, right? I mean, 10 years back, or even let's say 5 years back, right? I mean, let's just go back to the year before COVID-19, right? I mean, you had these chatbots that could like vaguely sound correct, and were just generally kind of answering to how are you doing, or where are you going, to the point of now where they're actually able to give like fairly articulate answers to fairly things.
Right.
Specious they may be, but they're fairly articulate, right?
Right.
And quite often reasonably somewhat correct on like kind of things that are mundane, right?
Right.
And let's say I can use them to just polish my emails, right? And so given that, just the curiosity of what exactly is happening here, what is it working, how is it working, right? Like the idea of, let's say, let's look behind the hood. Let's try and understand what exactly is happening. What is the algorithms that are working? What is the math behind those algorithms? What's the
Right.
science behind those algorithms?
Yes.
Like how is the data stored? Right? There are interesting questions, and I think that kind of curiosity is something that I think is a very important takeaway.
Right,
Right?
right.
Like how have humans managed to do this in such a short period of time, right?
Yeah, and this field is almost growing at a rate faster than we can even talk about it.
Yeah.
Like there is so much development happening within such a short period of time that it's almost too fast for us to really have opinions on it before the opinion has already had to change.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Professor, for talking to us today. It was a really great conversation.
It was a pleasure talking to you too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I really hope that the students and everybody else, the audience, was able to take away something from this episode. And thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of KreAItive Dialogues. We look forward to seeing you some other time.